What's up guys and welcome back to Tech Planet. Today we are going to be doing an experiment on the length of the internode. Let's check it out. Okay, so today we're going to be answering the age-old question, does size matter? And we're talking about node size, and even more specifically, the actual internode length on either side of the actual node. Alright, so for this experiment we are going to do 4 different varieties. So we're going to do a very small one, a medium-sized one, a very long one, and then an absolute micro size. So what I'm really talking about here is the internode portion of the plant. So the node is a very small section where the leaf usually comes out of the vine, and then usually when people take cuttings they leave a certain length on either side of the node, and I want to find out what kind of influence that has on propagation. So basically all these cuttings will have the nodes at the very center with internode area on both sides, and the internode is basically just the vine portion between each node. On some plants it's really tight, and then on other more viney plants it can get pretty long. The one I'm super curious about is going to be like basically the micro node propagation, and I'm going to show you exactly what the growth point looks like, and that's that little nub thing sticking out, and so that's going to be where the new growth comes from because it's already coming out basically. So I want to cut as much of the plant away from that just to see if like the very minimal amount can still grow. So for the micro propagation one I took a lot of smaller cuttings, but basically to get this experiment started I have the 3 main portions, which is just multiple cuttings at different sizes, small, medium, large, and I've got them all in water, and then I'm going to put the micro ones just in a very small, like almost like condiment cup with a tad bit of water just to keep things moist. I don't want to dunk these in water. Alright, so about a half a month has gone by since we started this experiment. There wasn't too much growth or really much rooting at all of the main bin, so we're just going to focus on the smaller one. I'm going to try not to mess with these too much because I don't want to, I guess, disturb them, because I feel like these smaller ones are pretty fragile. But you can see 2 of them already have put out quite a bit of growth. Actually, the new growth is almost doubled in size. Some of them are even starting to root, while other really small ones really aren't doing much yet. But even so, I'm amazed by the progress of the ones in this little cup. Again, it's just been in a sealed cup with a little bit of water at the bottom just to keep things humid and moist, and you can already see that there's a ton of growth for the size, obviously. So this is already pretty crazy. So let's leave them sit for a little longer. Alright, we are at an entire month that has passed by since our original cuttings. So let's take a look at the big ones out of the big cup and just kind of see where they're at. We're going to start with the largest ones first. Looking from far away, you can't really see too much root growth, but you can see quite a bit of actual growth point growth. Some of it's pretty big. Looking up close, you can see multiples are rather long actually. There's multiple nodes coming out of the new growth point. There's even leaves and everything, so they're pretty far ahead for being only a month. Next up is going to be our medium-sized ones, and again the root growth isn't very crazy. I think something's up with the water, but it shouldn't affect the experiment because they're all in the same water. Anyways, looking quick and close, you can see that there is some decent growth on here. However, most of it is smaller than the largest one. Next, when we look at the actual smallest ones, not the micro, but the smaller one of the 3, you can see that they all have some growth, very little root growth, but we're more focused on nodal growth and just seeing like how much energy you get from actually leaving internode on the nodes. So yeah, looking close at them, you can see that they're all doing pretty well. They all have growth coming out of them, and like I would expect, it's a little smaller than the previous ones. So when I look at more of the top performing nodes in each class, you can see the correlation so far. I don't know if it's causation, but the biggest ones have a pretty big growth point, the medium one has a pretty medium growth point, and the small one has a small growth point. I just want to bring up a quick side topic about like rot on the internodal part. I get a lot of DMs, I see a lot of people freaking out in Facebook groups. When they see that browning on the edges, that it's even slowly moving towards the center, people really tend to freak out about this and think it's like doomsday, but really it's not a big deal. Usually it kind of stops on its own, and once you have new growth, that stuff can pretty much hit the center and it's just going to fall off and the new growth will be just fine. So don't panic about this stuff unless it's like spreading rapidly. Usually it's pretty natural and you don't have to worry. Alright, moving on to our little cup of the micronodes. They're still doing pretty good. The growth has progressed quite a bit. I did leave it dry out a little bit. I'm really struggling balancing like enough water but not too much to make them rot, because they seem to be a little fragile to me. But so far they're doing pretty good. You can see them too up against the battery, just to give you an idea of the actual size of these. Like I said, these are absolutely tiny, but they're still growing. Alright, it has been about a month and a half since we originally made all the cuttings, and let's start off with the small cup this time. This one is the most exciting for me because it's the most extreme. So right off the bat you can see a lot of things are happening in this cup, so we'll kind of break it down a little bit. But looking up close at all of them, you can already see one has a whole leaf coming out. Another one of the super small ones is putting out some growth, and things are doing pretty good. Looking at the one with the actual leaf, which is wild, you can see some things are kind of going wrong. I let the root completely dry out. Like I said, I was struggling regulating the moisture, and you can see that the actual like base node and internode portions are turning yellow and dying. One of the actually very small ones from previous that wasn't doing much is starting to poke out some new growth, so I'm excited to see that the very tiniest of them is still able to start growing. The other semi-large one of the micro ones is still growing. I think I let the root sort of rot, so we'll see what happens to that. And then lastly, one of the really small ones really dried out and is not doing very good. I want to come back to the node with the actual leaf poking out, just to kind of help people lose some of the fear involved in propagating. You can see that the base node that this is grown from looks horrible at this point. It's about to die, and in fact it's already broken off due to my poor handling, but I'm not worried at all. Once you see a new leaf, you basically have a whole new node that can put out its own roots and support itself. So there's no need to panic when that parent node starts to go away and die. Since we already have the macro, the ultra macro lens on, basically, we might as well look at the other three, and you can see again one of the really small ones is pushing out growth. The other one is still looking decent. And then the smallest, the other really small one, it dried out quite a bit, so I doubt there's much life in there. At this point, I'm sick of just a plain cup and trying to regulate the water and the moisture in there, so I'm just going to mix up some perlite with a little bit of soil and try and get these micro nodes in there and see what happens. They're going to be open, I think, for the most part. I'll close them a little bit depending on how I regulate the humidity and whatnot, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, so next up, now that we looked at the micro ones, let's look at our normal series of just three, the large, medium, and small. From far away with just a broad scan of all three sections, it's kind of hard to tell what's really going on at this point. There are quite a bit of roots and there's quite a bit of growths, so let's take a closer look. Starting with the large one, just in a clump here, you can already see it's pretty crazy and actually quite confusing to look at, because it's hard to tell what was the original node and what is the new growth. But when you look even closer, we can really see that these took off. I mean, all of them have new growth that's at the very minimum 3 nodes, if not almost 5 or 6 nodes long. So there's really quite a bit of growth that has taken place here, and they're doing fantastic. The roots haven't been too crazy, but I think it's something with the water because they've all kind of suffered that way. But again, I just want to see how much energy and growth they can put out. Now moving on to the medium one, it is a pretty similar story to the larger one. Let's take a closer look. As I look at each one up close, I am noticing a similar trend to the previous ones. Again, they all have growth. Some are around 3, some even max out at about 4, but again, really good, but just not quite as good as the larger ones. They're all long, but about half the size of the large ones. So that brings us to our last section, and that is the small section. And looking up close at those, you can see again it's a similar story, a similar trend. They're all doing pretty good. A lot of them have at least 2 nodes, and they're almost keeping up with the medium size, but again, they're slightly a bit smaller and a little bit more behind. Alright, and after almost 2.5 months, let's check on that one micro node in the little jar that we have. You can already see it has a fully fledged leaf sticking out with new growth coming as well. And when I try and pick it up, it's got some sort of root structure or something's hanging on to all the material because there's a little ball hanging from it. So I'm just going to adjust this into the middle and call this one a success as well. I mean, this is a legitimate plant that's going to keep continuing on. The other ones seem to peter away, but I just think it was because I didn't regulate the moisture properly, and they could have done better if I did better. But either way, I'm extremely excited to see that those just tiny cuts still resulted in a plant and success, and they didn't just insta die. So it means you got a chance with pretty much anything out there. But what conclusions can we actually get from this experiment? For sure, I would definitely say that the more internode that you have on either side of the node, the better off and the much faster growth you're going to get out of the newest growth point. But that doesn't mean you have to have really long cuttings. Well guys, that pretty much sums up this video. The results were pretty awesome. I know I have seen some people in the comments tell me, this is in previous videos, that like all the energy is actually like in the growth point, and so the internode lengths don't really matter. But from this experiment, it seems like they did. I hope you guys actually try this experiment at home actually, and let me know if you have the same results or different results, because I'm always curious if there's something I'm not taking into consideration that you might have, and that leads us to different results. I really love these experiments, and I hope you guys do too. And as always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.